Welcome to Behind the Thin Blue Line, a Whisper in the Shadows podcast, where I explore the human side of policing and law enforcement. I hope you're enjoying our conversations with former and current police officers as I delve into the complexity of policing and how it affects the human side of police as a person. I'm Jason Somerville, and I was a Queensland police officer for nearly 14 years, as well as working undercover for over 2 of those years. Hopefully, you've been listening to my stories of my time undercover through my alter ego, Michael Bates. Well, I've decided it's time we heard from other police and let them tell their stories. Today, I'm chatting with Mark Battersby, who is a former Victorian police officer. Good afternoon, Mark. How are you today?
G'day, I'm very well.
That's
Jason?
good. Thank you
Hmm.
for agreeing to join the podcast and for agreeing to have a chat about your policing experiences.
Mm. Yep, no
Now,
worries.
what I generally like to do is start off, I guess, with a little bit of a background in regards to when you were a police officer, how long you did it for, that sort of thing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, I joined in 1981 into the Police Academy in Victoria at the tender age of 19.
Yep.
And yeah, look, I could say various things, I suppose. Just a quick intro at the moment. I did 15 years, or nearly 15 years. It was mostly on the front line or general duties, as we called it, divvy vans, watch houses, etc. I did spend a short time the police air wing.
Yep.
There's a story there, but anyway, so that's sort of very very brief intro to the policing side of my life, I suppose.
No, that's okay. Was it mainly metropolitan or did you do country work as well?
I did some country, yeah, not far out of Melbourne. It would be classed as country for a couple of years, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, w- how did you become a police officer? What was the process along there? Like, did you always want to be a police officer when you were growing up? And what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Hmm. Well, I think actually I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's very unusual for a young man, you know. So I did actually have an interview with the Air Force prior to the police, but
Yep.
really and that wasn't successful at that time. I was very young, but I was playing football basically, footy down here in Melbourne,
Yep.
and there was probably half a dozen young guys that hadn't been in the police force for long, and we got on pretty well. I liked their company and playing footy and having beers with them and talking to them. And they'd talk about what they were doing, and I thought, well, that sounds a bit more exciting than doing uni lectures that I was doing in an engineering degree at the time. So
Yep.
I applied, and the rest is history with that. Got in, and away we went.
What engineering were you doing?
Electrical and communications.
And what was the plan?
Well, there was a pathway mapped out. Actually, my
Yeah.
father was fairly high up in Telstra,
Yep.
and so it was. I was always good at mathematics and that sort of thing. So I suppose I was steered into that to end up at Telstra and have a big career there. But the two problems of that, the two main problems, is my father was there,
Yeah.
and the second problem was that I wanted a little bit more, something a bit more, people orientated. I think.
And you couldn't get much more people orientated than policing. Did that cause any
Yeah.
issues? Did your father, was he happy that you joined the police and didn't follow him in his footsteps?
No, no, my family
Oh,
weren't happy at all. No,
oh.
but
Didn't like don't like the color blue.
I just think they thought for me it wasn't. It was a bit sort of understand or under par for me as a person, if you like.
Yeah.
Not quite the right fit, but whatever. They hadn't had a lot to. I don't have any police in the family, and as I said, I got to know what policing was about to a certain extent through playing footy with these blokes.
Um, uh, did they eventually warm to it?
Not really.
Not really.
I think the only one that really supported me was my mother.
Yeah.
She thought, "Oh no, he'll be right." But look, I was only 19, and I think, they just saw me as a school kid. What
Well,
the
yeah.
heck? What the
I,
heck is he going into this job for?
I mean, I did it at 21, and I'm pretty sure my parents still thought of me as a school kid too. Mind you, I did look like one. Uh, so,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about your journey. So, you've gone
Mm.
into the police. How long was the academy at that stage?
I think about 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then you were probationary for 12 months.
yeah, 2 years I think in
Two
total.
years. Okay.
in
And
Victoria.
where do you, are you able to say, or do you feel like, do you want to say where you were stationed, what parts of
Oh
Melbourne?
yeah, I can give you where I was,
Yeah.
names, the bosses that I hated, all the rest of it, whatever you want.
No,
I'm
let's
not
not go that
prejudiced about
far.
this stuff.
I
I'm
was
not
going to say,
This
let's
is
not
how
go
I
that
roll with life.
far. So
I think
what
this is
areas
why
did you work in?
I will tell you, but I think this is a key to my recovery. That I'm very honest
Yep.
with myself, and I've had to go through 12-step addiction programs to the
Yep.
alcohol and all the rest of it. And the only way to really get through and recover with have a strong recovery is to be honest.
Uh,
But anyway, yeah, look, I was in the city for a while. I did a training station out in the outer east. Yeah, in the city. I mean, just to go through that without getting into what happened there or didn't or all the rest of it.
Yep.
So I ended up going to Hawthorn, I think. I don't know whether you know where these
Yeah.
places are.
Yeah. I've lived in Melbourne, so I've got a fair idea.
Okay, for a couple of years. And then I got it in my head, look, well, basically it was like, you know, young bloke, if there's all these opportunities in this sort of job, I'm going to go for it. So I ended up applying for a few things and I got the air wing, the police air wing. Now, without going into it too much at the moment, but unfortunately my alcoholism was roaring, or I didn't really realise that. I'm sure some people must have known.
Did
And I ended up drinking on a training exercise, so getting
mm,
violently drunk, not violently drunk, very drunk. And there's a story with all that. And of course, they decided it wasn't good to have on call police air wing people, pissed at home.
did you actually have a pilot's license?
No, no. So
No.
I was training to be an air observer, I think they called it.
Okay.
So air crew, learning how to do rescues and
Yep.
searches, that sort of thing was probably more prominent then than actual police work. I think they've merged into more of the, tracking cars around and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff than they did then. Yeah,
So was that a helicopter or was that fixed wing back in those days?
yeah, helicopter mainly, yeah.
Helicopter. Okay. Fair enough. I
Mm,
one of the joys of, I guess, my policing experience, and it wasn't actually
mm,
me working, but because I was a police officer, when I was in LA, I got to do a shift, an 8-hour shift with the helicopter
mm,
crew in
mm,
LA in one of the police forces there. And
mm,
that was eye opening. That was really, really eye opening, to the
mm.
point where we were actually getting shot at. They said, "Don't worry, we're a little bit too high." I
They,
went,
they do a lot of shooting over there.
they do, yes, at each other and at police. All right, so
So just to round that out, then, so
yeah,
I ended up out at my last few years or so. I was out at a station called Murrelbach.
yes,
And that's where a bit of country came in. I was seconded to Alinda up in the hills for a couple of years. And
okay.
that was, yeah.
What did you enjoy about policing?
Well, I always enjoyed I went in basically to save the world, as you do.
Yep.
And, young men, we can do anything. We're fit, strong. It was great to run down crooks. It was good to be. I really liked the fact that the general duties, as they call it, which really underplays really what it is in my mind. So you're out in a divvy van to get the call. Somebody's stabbing someone or trying to on the street, and you're the men to go and keep the peace. Grab the
Yes.
crooks, throw them in the divvy van, and give everyone a big kiss and a hug, and
S-
then go and do all the paperwork, which no one wanted to do. Of course, well, I didn't want to do it. So
well,
I could.
no,
Was
no one ever,
quite
no one ever
capable,
wants to do
and even
paperwork.
no. Well, on reflection, how stupid is it? I mean, probably half the time you're doing paperwork. I mean, you're not.
Yeah,
That's not what you're there for. And I've spoken to some female friends of mine that weren't in the job, but they
yeah.
said, we'd have been quite happy to have the role. We'd be hired. We'd be at the station. You come in, dump your crooks off and all that, and they do the paperwork. I
A-
mean,
a-
that's a very simple view of it, but
there are ways that I'm sure they could do. Yeah, like you're right. Probably about 50% of your time is spent doing paperwork,
mm,
for the other 50% of time of dealing with
mm,
dead shits, basically. Um,
mm,
I was going to ask you something in regards to so back in those days, that would have been before we had things like capsicum spray and tasers and that
Mm,
sort of stuff as well.
that's
So
right. Yeah.
it just would have been a baton and your wit to
Well,
try and
most of the
calm some
time
of
it
these
was,
people down.
headlock down on the ground, handcuffs. It was pretty much most of the time. There was
Yeah,
usually a bit of talking beforehand. If they responded to a bit of talking, then that's okay. If they don't, bang, and that's I really feel really sorry for them these days because they got so much shit on their belt and everything. I don't know how they walk.
it's very
Um,
hard to sit in the police car, that's for sure. Especially
well, it would be.
when you've got a little 5'3", 40 kilogram female who has to put all that stuff on her belt. That's why they've gone to the vests now, so they can get
Mm,
some of that stuff off their vests, off their
mm,
belts. Um,
mm.
all right. So, where did you stay at Constable the whole way through? Did you get
I was
promoted?
a senior connie. I took promotion, did exams for senior connie,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, the way I viewed it, I saw, sergeant may have been a consideration, but really after that, they're all wankers and just trying to chop each other's heads off to get to the top. And
Yeah.
I joined the job to be a copper, not a I don't know, management person or whatever.
Not a corporate climber.
Not a corporate climber, no.
So that would have, and depending on where you are in Queensland, if you're a
Mm,
senior connie, you get there's some managerial roles. I mean, there was some stations where as a senior connie you were the officer in
mm,
charge, whereas
mm.
other stations it was a sergeant. Did it work the same way where you were?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was in the country, sometimes I'd be on my own.
Yeah.
For probably half the time, whether it be day shift or some of the evening shifts, we tried to, pair up on the evening shifts.
Yep.
But basically, senior Connie is an unsung, leader in the field. Really, everybody looks to you when the shit hits the fan because they're all very junior.
Yep. That's right. And
Um,
when it doesn't go right, everyone up above you tends to
yeah,
try to get back down the hill. Um,
yeah,
so. Uh, just talking about the fact that you worked one up a lot and that sort of
mm,
thing.
mm,
Obviously, we didn't have the news cycles when I was in the police, and
mm,
so you wouldn't have had them new because I was 10 years after you. Uh,
mm,
do you think that it's more dangerous today to be a police officer, and there's more requirement for people to work two up rather
mm,
than the ability to work one up, or do you think that's a figment of the 24-hour news cycle?
mm. There might have been a couple of questions there, but I think you're asking, do you think it's more
Yeah,
dangerous now, just full
yeah,
stop? And yeah. Um, I think it's a loaded question in a lot of ways. I would say yes, but I would say the main reason for that is because they're so worried about health and safety and everything that they've managed themselves out of a job, basically. Not the run of the rank and file. We're talking about the management and the way they manage.
and
They just
that's
don't
had to.
seem to. Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
they don't seem to be able to. In my day, it was quite evident the way we were trained and everything. That if you had a head on your shoulders, once you got your experience, you're allowed to use discretion.
Yep.
It's what Mark says, and what Mark says goes
Do
because
you think
he's
that's
there.
been
And
taken away these days?
oh yeah, oh absolutely, you can see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it must be well, it is excruciating because I talked to plenty that have got out over the last little while, and because I'm part of a group that meet every fortnight here
Yep.
for support because it's just the PTSD and the ramifications that are rampant.
Yep.
And so I help out with that. I actually work as a counsellor now,
Okay.
but we can talk more about that later.
Yeah,
But
I want to touch on that. I want to come back to that because there's the discussions that we've had
yeah,
offline.
so yeah,
I want to
so
go
I
back
would
to
say,
that.
look, I was very good actually. I'm very verbose and very good at connecting with people. So most
Yep.
of the time, even if it was a gunpoint, I'd make a connection and resolve the situation. Everybody gets to live. But there's not a lot of coppers, full stop, that have that attitude. They just, I think, a lot now. Probably, I hesitate to say this, but there might be a better way. But never mind. They don't quite have the brain power now. Maybe it's more to do with the training
Y-
to
y-
like it's a high level of
Yeah,
thinking to walk into a situation. There's somebody that's quite off their nut, obviously. One I'm just thinking of is where this fella, he was in a unit, he'd locked himself in, he'd poured petrol over himself and over the head of a woman
yeah,
who was there standing beside him. And I got to probably about 10, 15, 20 minutes in, I had him release the hostage just by talking to him. And had him isolated, and there was a lot of other coppers there. But to cut a long story short, in the end, I told the boss what I was going to do. He didn't like it. In fact, he didn't want me to do initially, which was to take my gun off, which I
yeah,
did, and I've done it before. I've done
yep,
this before. This is not bullshit.
yeah,
And the other fellas that see me do it before, they took their gun off. I handpicked two or three others, and we went. Of course, we grabbed him in the end when we got close.
yeah.
But the boss, he said, "Well, certainly not going to get any medals or anything, Mark, because my write up will be nothing like what happened." And this is the honesty of the bullshit that happens in these organisations. I'm sure it hasn't got any better. That really the people, inspector and above or whatever they are, you've got them there. They're about their own ass. They're about
Yep,
their own self importance, and they
yep.
have no concern at all for the welfare of the people underneath them.
No, and
Generally speaking,
and that rings true with the people I've spoken to.
So look, what I
Um,
did, when I relay this, I mean, I get comments of people like fairly high up in counselling and psychology, and they say, "Well, that's very brave, but not everybody's capable of doing that," and I accept that. I accept that. Um, but
well,
I make the call. Hey, I made the call.
that's right. But I was just going to circle back to a point you made where you said that
Yeah.
the brain power or the high function you need to use to be able to make those decisions and be able to
Mm,
talk people down. Do you think it's a fact that they don't have it, or do you think it's a fact that they haven't been trained to use it? Because I know when I went through, and I was one
mm,
of the first 400 after the Fitzgerald inquiry, so
mm,
we were taught all these wonderful university things. But one of the things we were taught was how to make decisions on our own. And we
mm,
were given training along the lines of if someone's trying to commit suicide, then, you know, trigger words, not to say what you can say,
mm,
trying to talk people down, that sort of stuff. I don't
mm.
actually know if they're taught those sorts of things in today's day and age. Um,
All right.
because at school and at university now, you're taught remember this. Remember this. It's going to be in
That's
your
right. Yeah.
test. Remember this.
Yeah.
It's
Tick.
not as a free
Tick.
think. Yeah, it's not a free thinking. Uh, I
No.
guess education anymore. And we're
Mm.
getting people from universities going to policing now because that's what
Yeah.
makes policing professional.
Yeah. Yeah, so an interesting experience, eh? But as far as the danger, I think that it's just as dangerous. I mean, I dealt with people; they might not have been on ice, but they're on something else.
Yep.
There's certainly plenty of alcohol around and weapons and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that was one example. But there were plenty of other times when you did nip it in the bud pretty early because you have a few of it good strong fellas overpowering people, and that's where I said, look, I've got two daughters and a wife. I love women, but they shouldn't be on the front line. They shouldn't be on a divvy van. It's just crazy, absolutely crazy.
Fair enough.
Mm,
I know quite a few female
yeah.
coppers that would disagree with that, and I know quite a few
I'm
that would
sure they might
probably
disagree, but they
they
don't have the strength. They don't have the physical strength. They just don't. There might be the odd one out of
yeah.
1 in a million, but
Okay, fair enough. Now, so
mm,
15 years, so mid 90s would have been when you finally pulled the pin.
yeah, about
So
96.
that early 90s period, there
Mm,
was a very much a shift in, I guess, the, from outside and from police in the
mm,
other states because I'd just been sworn in.
mm,
I actually did an undercover job based
mm,
with Victorian, so Victorian Crims.
mm,
So I went
mm,
and spent some time in Victoria and with the homicide squad.
mm,
There seemed to be very much a shoot first, ask questions later type thing in the early 90s.
mm.
Is
Oh,
that
as I said, I think it's an individual thing.
yeah,
I had a mindset where I told myself. I remember I had the conversation with myself, if you like,
yeah,
that everyone lives. Mark goes somewhere, and everyone lives.
yep.
So with that goal in mind, um, that's what I did. I do everything I could, but still maintaining my own safety and that of others, obviously. And so, you know, I just
Uh,
found that unless you had the worst narcissistic crook you'd imagine, and
yeah.
I dealt with a couple of them, obviously. You can make a connection with people. They're not really fair dinkum. You say, mate, if you don't put that gun down, I'm coming across to fucking grab it out of your hands. You know,
Yeah,
and so it's all psychology, isn't it?
it is. But I guess in that particular part of history, if we want to call it that, there were a lot of crims in Melbourne that were prepared to shoot you, even if you did try and come and take it out of their hands.
Yeah, there probably wasn't as many as purported, I don't think. But anyway,
Right? And that's sort of where I was getting to with that question was
yeah.
that, was that a particularly violent time with people who didn't respect police
Mm.
in the criminal?
Well, we obviously had the bombing and
Yeah.
the execution of the two from Wall Street, which were pretty close together,
Yep.
and that definitely affected well at all levels, but particularly if you're out on a divvy van, you suddenly approached calls that would have been almost benign prior as pretty high level, high level risk.
What sort of impact does that have on you personally?
Well, I think it's what policing does anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
eventually, you're on high alert 24/7. You never come down. There's always somebody somewhere that's trying to get you. Um,
Do you still have that hyper? Not sensitivity is probably not the right word, but
mm.
hyper awareness, hyper vigilance
I
rather.
don't think I'm hyper vigilance. From my understanding, is where you virtually don't sleep much and that sort of thing. Whereas I sleep like a baby. In fact, better
Yeah.
than a baby probably now. I do have my 7 8 hours sleep, and it's just that's non-negotiable. The world can go bye-byes until I wake up for breakfast. But it's
What?
taken me a while to get to that. Taken me a while to get
Yeah.
to that. But what you're talking about is still there. In fact, there's an example just today. I'm driving down the road, and it's very windy here in Melbourne, and I'm noticing all this debris everywhere, and then I look up because I'm looking at trees and things,
Yep.
and I see this branch has straddled a power line, and then I see power lines down, and people are just streaming past, streaming past. I mean, this is a very dangerous situation, So I call it in. I didn't do much more, and the
Yeah.
fire brigade turned up, and blah blah blah.
It's
So
not
I
your
guess
job.
what I'm saying is that, and you might have this as well. I'm sure you do, but I notice things out and about that the average person just doesn't see, or if they see something, they don't know what they're looking at, and that sort of stuff.
Do you find yourself looking around more? And this is a question
Yeah.
that when I drive, I'll I'll it's like I'm still in a police car and you're looking at
Mm.
everything that's going on. I still look as I drive past. I still look at cars to see what the
Yeah.
driver's like or who's in the passenger seat
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And I'm doing it subconsciously.
Mm.
Do you still have
Yeah.
that sort
I'm
of
not about.
reaction?
There might be a subconscious, but I think mine's conscious a lot of the time. I'm, you just. I'm happy with that because it's not going to go away, and I think it's actually a good thing.
Oh, so do
Uh,
I. I agree.
the
It was
safety of others and yourself, your family.
it was just brought up to
Um,
me the other day that I
yeah,
do it a lot. I went, "Well,
you
I
got to
didn't
be
really
careful,
notice."
but I'm not an idiot, so I've actually followed cars down the street that have been all over the place, but they're going at
Yeah,
a slow speed. And when I've got through and been talking to the copper at D24, I introduce myself so they know who I am and the observations. They go, "Yeah, that's fair enough." And I said, "Listen, if they take off, mate, I'm in my private car, my Mazda. I'm not following them. I'm not
yeah.
following at speed. So I'm not. I have been there, and we'll probably get into that later of how I was really affected. And there was a time when, well, I was a madman. I was a madman for a few years, for sure.
I'll come to that. So
Yeah.
you've done 15 years. You've got to senior connie,
Yeah.
all in uniform.
So mostly in uniform, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So What prompted you to leave?
Well, I couldn't get out of bed. That's
Yeah.
I was so badly PTSD with depression and everything, which they didn't call it PTSD then, they just called it job stress.
Yep.
Well, that's what the GP called it.
Yep.
And so I was bullied to resign. Actually, basically came to me on my deathbed, if you like, or sick bed, and said, you need to resign, son. You know, and if you don't, we'll fight you at court on the on the compensation and all that." So I had some real assholes to deal with.
And look, I appreciate
Yeah.
this is sensitive to you and personal to you, but can you go into that? Do you feel like going into that a little bit more? Are you able to go into that a little bit more in regards to how did you
Well,
get to that point of
mm.
I don't want to get out of bed. I'm assuming was it at home? Was it in hospital when they
No,
came
no,
to
I
you
was
and
at
said,
home. Yeah,
"Yep"?
yeah.
When you're at home,
Well,
how did
look,
it get to that
I
point?
believe. Yeah, well, I believe on reflection now that 18 months into the job, I went to a fatal involving a 2-year-old girl.
Yep,
And the other thing that happened with that, I was with a partner, but I was right in the centre of the CBD in Melbourne,
yep.
working out of Russell Street. And the D24 operator was calling for backup, and not one person came to give us any support. And they would have been there, and we're in the city,
It was.
And so,
Was there a debrief about it afterwards, and was there a reason for
yeah,
it?
right.
Oh,
Yeah, plenty of piss. Plenty of piss. No,
yeah.
but no such thing as a debrief then. No
Okay.
such thing. There was, as I said, there was absolutely no concern for the welfare of the individual officers, whatever you went
Yeah.
to. Yeah, there might have been the odd sergeant around that took a bit of interest, but usually not really. And but I believe I mentioned that because I believe that was the start of my PTSD. Now looking
So
back,
that you said that was 18 months in. So you've carried
Yeah.
that for
Yep.
15, 14 years.
Yeah, and everything else, and I'm sure I'm not the
Yeah.
only cop that does that.
Oh,
Everything.
no.
I mean,
I
it
definitely
sort of
definitely.
culminated in eventually, if you like, the one that really did it all. Well,
Yeah.
was an internal thing because I was, and look, I was drinking on duty. Eventually,
Yep.
I was stuffed, and any opportunity that came up, that's what I was doing. So I'm not going to go into all that right now, but basically, I was charged with drinking on duty,
Yep.
and the other fellow they were after him for some other things as well, apparently. But anyway, um, but eventually, about 1 o'clock in the morning, we pulled up this bloke because he just about ran into us with his lights off and all that sort of thing, and yeah, I ended up with. I just wanted. I was just going to do a breath test, but I ended up
Yep.
rolling around the roadway with this prick, and he had his he had his hand on my gun button. He was trying to
Yep.
get my gun out of the holster. So the only thing and that was another one. Lack of support. My partner there. I don't know why he wouldn't come and help me, but he wouldn't. He got on the radio, and I don't know why he bothered doing that because we're in the middle of nowhere. But anyway. Um, Yeah, so I just had to belt the hell out of this bloke. Fortunately, I am pretty strong, and once I get going, there's no stopping me. So I just bashed him in the head until he took his hand off the gun.
And
And but that sort of did it. In as much as I'm going, this is I've got a young family. This is bullshit.
yeah.
I've had enough of this stuff. But with that, it's not that easy because that's all I knew since I was 19. So what am I going to do to feed my family? And at that
And
point.
that's very true. Um, so
Mm,
from that point to when they've come to you
mm,
and said, you know, don't fight us, you're resigning. Did you
mm.
have much of a thought process about what am I going to do? Did you, or was it just a thought in the back of your mind? And that thought in the
No,
back,
look,
because it was in your back of your mind, kept you in the job.
I was just struggling to live one shift or one day at a time,
Yep.
So I didn't, I obviously, well, not obviously, you don't know, but I had thoughts of, returning to the engineering degree, which I eventually did.
Yep.
Um, so it was really until my system said, you're not going anywhere, you're certainly not going back into that.
Yep.
Um, nothing really. And the drinking on duty. But even then, see, they looked at it like, oh, what an arsehole, he's drinking on duty. Well, they were probably drinking as well, or had done in their career, and
Well,
turned around
I,
Said the
I
best way out of this is to charge Mark and he's the scapegoat,
I know of at least one homicide squad
Mm,
detective who was drinking on duty and ended up crashing a car at the top of St Kilda Road. But
mm.
and you probably remember that because that would have been just before you left, I reckon.
Okay. Mm,
Um, and so there were a lot of people that were doing it.
mm.
The homicide squad in Melbourne, they had a soft drink
Mm.
fridge. There was no soft
Mm.
drink in it.
No.
It was
Yeah.
just full of beer and drinks at the end of the
Yeah.
shift. Um,
So, yeah, go on.
so you've come to this conclusion. Can you expand a little bit? And you don't have to, obviously, because I appreciate
Mm.
you know the effects. But when they've come to you,
Mm.
was it an inspector? Was it a high commissioned officer? Do they just come around and say,
Oh,
"Here's
no,
your
it was, I
paperwork"?
mean, they were all involved, but basically the senior sergeant at my station was given the job to resolve things, I guess.
Yeah.
I just put it that I was bullied because you know what? I don't really remember much about that period of time.
Okay.
But in hindsight, there was no, oh, Mark, it's terrible. You're sick from the job, all that. It was like, how do we make ourselves, how do we make him disappear? You know?
Yeah. And not have it and
What
not
is it?
have come back on us. Yeah. And that's a common
Mm,
story that you hear from people, especially that up till about the late 90s to
mm,
early 2000s, and
mm,
it still happens now. But I think there's more of an awareness from some senior
mm,
police of what you would have been going through if it had been
mm,
today.
mm, mm,
It doesn't mean that they definitely would have accepted it. Okay, so
mm.
the period for you to leave, what was that? Was it a month, 2 months? What sort of time
I
frame
was a
did
bit
they give you?
longer. My memory is I had about 9 months sick leave or something
Yep,
up my sleeve, so I took all that.
yep,
And so, look, it is a bit cloudy. I resigned. I think I just eventually went and did some casual work or something. During that time, decided, well, and talking with my wife, of course,
yep.
and still young enough to go to university, and maybe this engineering degree might be it, and be the future.
Did you go back in that 9 months?
No, no, no.
No.
This would have been maybe a year after I resigned or something like that.
Okay.
And they accepted me back into second year because I'd already done a couple of years.
Yep.
And so I went right through that over a few years, full time.
Yep.
Um, wasn't easy for probably a couple of main reasons. One of them is that any study at that level is, difficult. They don't make it easy. You've got to pass exams and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that's a bit of a bugger when it comes to education, isn't it?
Yeah. And so there was that, and I think just loss of identity. I really didn't know who I was. In hindsight, and that's what we try and do now, what we're aiming for, I think we've still got a long way to go, is that, police, like a lot of other areas, service areas need a proper transition program, and they need,
Definitely.
and they need to be led through it, as much as they want to, of course, and tailored to the individual. Because you really suffer a loss of identity, and I think particularly in a job like that. Um, but well, for me, I mean, there's a bit more awareness. I have very little support because people around you, they're going, "What the hell is going on?
Yep.
What is wrong with him?" Like just go. Even my wife, well, that was my first wife, but go up the street and get another job, and she'll be sweet. Don't worry about it. But it
In,
didn't.
so in regards to that loss of identity, and this is something that I'm
Mm,
exploring at the moment in regards
mm,
to the
mm,
counselling that I'm going through, is we're talking about that
mm,
for a multitude of reasons because it
mm,
manifests itself in other in
mm.
my current career. Um, do you think that it's because of the type of people that go into policing that they pin themselves to that identity?
Yeah, look, I think it could be anything, but to do with helping others. It's on that
Yep.
scale, I believe, or in that bag. And yeah, we are well. I can only speak for myself. I'm met plenty of others. We're passionate and we just give our all. We give our all. And I think it was a job that required that. It wasn't even those who pretended to say, "Oh, no, it's just a job and I'll just do this." But, along comes the next job that's a multiple fatality or something, or whatever it is. And, you don't just go home and say, "What's for dinner, love?" I just did my 9 to 5 and I've signed off, beauty,
Yeah.
You're very invested, and I had a bloke who I actually knew fairly well that I worked with in the younger days, and he became the head of what do they call it, the president of the police association.
Yep.
And he said, "Oh, Mark, you're just too invested." And I'm going, "You're full of shit." What are you supposed to do? So unless you're a complete narcissist, maybe he was, but um, we're not just sitting in a factory, painting, one box blue and one box red.
No, but the expectation is at the end of your shift, you just go home and put it all behind you.
Well, I don't know whether I don't know. I
No,
don't really know.
from the organisation I'm talking about.
Perhaps, I don't know, mate. I don't look as far as that's concerned. My focus is on obviously my recovery,
Yep.
and also the recovery of others that have walking a similar track to me. Been popped
Yep.
out, pushed out. As far as the police force goes, they can look after. I'm not interested.
No.
Because,
Sorry. Let
but I
me.
just want to make that clear that some people talk about, how can we change the manager of the police force? We won't. It's
No.
like the army and the military. It's a mindless machine. It'll be like this in another 100 years. It won't change.
No, that's true. I guess the point I was making is
Yeah.
you were saying that
Yeah.
people who have a normal job, it's not like you just
Mm.
finish at 5 o'clock and you go home and it's not worry about it. What I'm saying is
Mm.
though the expectation of the organisation has been for many years that at the
Mm.
end of your shift you just clock off and you go home and you shouldn't worry
Mm.
about it.
Mm.
But we know because of the fact that the jobs that you go to, that triple
Mm.
fatality, you're going to be thinking about that. Maybe not today, but
Mm.
in a week's time, in 12 months' time, in 20 years' time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with that because, some people call it like a bucket and you're putting,
Yep.
water into it for each whatever incident is that really does affect you or
Yep.
affect anyone, really. So I could see that probably a good 10 years, probably, before I got out, before I finished, my bucket was full. I was just like a hulk of a mess, just a shell of a man,
Yep.
How on earth I did the job, I don't know. I don't know. Really don't know.
Well, you obviously had, I
Mm.
don't know if crutch is the right word, but you
Mm.
had things that you used to get you through that. And for
Mm.
people who don't understand why that's necessary, they're never going to
Mm.
understand. But
Mm.
it's that type of job that they're the sorts of things that
Mm.
people use to get them through every
Mm.
day. Now, okay, so you've left, you've done your degree.
Mm.
Was that a walk into a new career, or were you still sort of lost and not and unsure about that identity and
I
of
was still a
who
bit
you were?
unsure because by the time I got through that, I'd sort of recovered a lot.
Yep.
And of course, I'm a people person and I'm working surrounded by, well, my wife calls them geeks, they're all technical people.
Yep.
And while I've got that ability, obviously, I'm good at maths or whatever, logic, they're not my people.
Yep.
And so I'm working through that. I did actually get work. I got work as a teacher at a TAFE. I got work as an engineer
Yep.
in industrial automation. So I was, these companies were German companies making specialist sensors for industrial automation. So there's all
So
sorts of
like
applications.
SICK or IFM or something or
Yeah,
other.
yeah, sick was one of them. Yeah,
Yep.
and look, it was interesting, but some of the people in management are about twice as worse as the people in management of the police force, if you can believe that.
I know I
They
can.
just they were tin men. They absolutely no heart at all. Nothing, nothing. And anyway, but as I'm recovering more and more, and then I sort of had another dip again,
Yep.
and I believe that was because really everything was unresolved.
Yep.
And so it seems to me, and it happened to me, got to about 50 odd, because I'm 62 now, but got to about 50 odd, and my whole system just exploded. And I ended up going into psych wards and all kinds of things through that period. Um, But you know what? All those bags of shit are now being used to help others, and I'm working my way through a diploma in counselling,
Yep.
and I enjoy the fact that I obviously work with and we help each other counsellors. We talk about our cases and things like that. But I have this ability to just grasp things because I've had so much experience with people. You know what's
Okay.
going on.
So, so you did 10 years in that electronics sort of space, the
Yeah,
engineering sort of
something
space.
like that, and a few other things thrown in. Yeah, yeah.
And then you've had pardon me, the unresolved uh,
Mm,
PTSD come up, and
mm.
that's given you now. I don't know whether you want to go into that in a little more detail or not, or we just move on from that. It's up to you whether you want to
Oh, I
talk about it
can.
or
It's
not.
I just move through it on the day and see how we go. What usually happens? Yeah, look, there's some things that I would like the 2-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk about it, but I'll start crying, and we'll
Well,
all be
it's
crying.
entirely look. One of the questions towards the end,
Well, that's that. But the other things, when you're talking about your life threatened and that, well, as I was talking about before, I can do that. I can
I'll
talk
give
about
you an
anything that's
opportunity to talk about
yeah,
stories of. I guess what I wanted to talk about was
yeah.
that period you said where it all fell apart again.
Mm.
What period did that take for you to come out of that sort of trough?
Sorry, what was the last bit you said? What?
What? How long did it take you? You said in about your 50s. That sort of all
Yeah, how
it,
long?
it
Well, I
all blew up.
suppose
How
if you
long did
looked
it
at
take you?
how long, it probably a journey. Like it's an ongoing
Oh,
journey in
yeah, I
some
know. I
ways.
realize that, but to get
But
back to
but
the point where you sort of
yeah,
like working again, etc.
yeah. Well, then after that, as I said, 50 or so, something like that. When I was 50 or so, yeah, it all blew up, and I was probably on the back of the trigger. Was probably effectively I was sacked from this from a company I was working for, and it seemed to be a setup and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, that triggered me into what my worth and ID and
Yep,
all that sort of stuff, self worth. I thought, well, I remember actually going home. Oh, that was that was before I wasn't actually sacked at that stage, but we're on the way. That's what they were trying to do. And I just walked into my lounge room. No one was home, and I just bawled my eyes out.
yep.
I thought, I can't do this anymore. This is so unfair, and I need help.
And
Um,
you're not the only person that's done that because
mm,
I'm 54, and I've got to say, in the last couple of years,
mm.
similar sorts of things, and I've done exactly the same.
Yeah, oh, look, I'm not ashamed of crying or whatever, but anyway, sometimes some people don't want to go into that space, but it is an important part of the recovery. But anyway,
It is, and I guess my point is that
yeah,
um, it wasn't. It's not just you. I've
mm.
been there,
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah,
and for people listening to this and
yeah,
watching
yeah.
this, they need to
Mm,
understand that there are other people that are in that space. So if they're in that space, they're not
yeah.
alone. It's not just them.
No, so what we're hoping for is it's not really diverting, but going into the recovery and the help and supports.
Yep,
I want to be one of the people that an ex copper or even a serving copper can say, let's ring Mark because he's been through a lot of this and he knows what to do. I'm a trained counsellor, or
yep.
I'm
No,
developing that.
that's
Because
when did
if
you
you
get
ask
into
me,
when did you get into
yeah,
that then? So when did you get into that counselling
oh,
from
this
when
is
you
only in
got
the last
sacked?
12 months.
Okay.
So I've just not long completed all the theory, and I'm at a counselling practice
Yep,
with a group of other, we call ourselves provisional counsellors, and
yep,
it's almost like going to academy. It's really great. It's, we can, we have meetings where we can talk to about our cases, and with our, supervisor, this woman's just, fantastic. She really is. She's got a real thing about training people. So a trainer that's not just ticking the box. She wants to
does she
really
have
see
an
it through.
emergency services background or a
Not
first responder
really, but
background?
she does do some work. She does some speaking, and she's a keynote speaker as well. So she does some
Yep,
speaking with the Victoria Police because they've. It's interesting, isn't it? They've obviously recognised they have to do something, but unfortunately, most of the people in management are still going, "Oh, we'll give them this like lip service and see if that makes them happy." And I know that sounds, but that's my take on it all.
do you know
Not what
why?
you really.
Do you know? Do you know
Sorry?
why? So I don't know. I don't know how much you know about rugby league, being an AFL
Yeah,
state.
yeah, not
But
really.
in the rugby league, so there's the CTE, the brain disease, which comes from being repeatedly hit in the head,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's big in AFL as well, but in the NRL,
mm,
they've got to the point now where
mm,
you're playing a physical game where if you even
mm,
look like you've been hit in the
mm,
head, they're
mm,
penalising it. The reaction to that is that reaction has come about because for so long they haven't done anything,
mm,
and now they've gone the complete opposite direction in regards to it, and
mm,
they've diluted what it is. And I think the police at the moment is at that tipping point of, oh, we've got to say the right things,
mm,
because if they were to go the next step,
mm,
then
mm,
the people who would sue and all those sorts of things becomes
mm,
unsustainable,
mm,
and people wouldn't be police officers anymore
mm.
because
Well, I don't recommend anybody do it, quite frankly.
I do have a
After
question
all
about.
I've been through.
Oh, well, I was going to ask that. One of the questions I was going to ask is, would you if
Yeah.
someone come to you and said, "I want to be a police officer," would you recommend it?
Well, the first question I'd ask them is why.
Right.
So I had my counselling hat on, and I wouldn't
Yep.
put my, what I think on them. Although I used to when I was sort of quite unhappy with them. But
Yep.
I'd just say, are you aware, of the dangers and the impacts? There are, most police end up with PTSD,
Yep.
and are you aware of that? Is that something you're willing to sacrifice and all that sort of stuff? So that's what I do. But I mean, if you want to know what it was, not that well, it's a little while ago now, but
Yeah.
it was, do you want your life fucked in 1 year or 2 years?
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. But anyway, um, so we're talking about, recovery,
Yep.
and well, at least how I recovered.
Yeah.
So eventually, in about 2014, I think, because I say about 10 years ago now, I was in so I'd been seeing counsellors or whatever to no avail,
Yep.
psychologists or whatever, in a psych ward, and I'd been violently arrested by the police a couple of times. They come to my home, and
Yep.
even my wife would say no, she was concerned, but she didn't. She thought it was an overreaction. But in talking to them, and this is perhaps where reflects where the police force has got to on the type of people. They'd say things like, and I think I was arrested illegally actually under the Mental Health Act, but they'd say things like, well, Mark's a fairly big bloke, he's an ex-copper from back in the 80s, and if he goes off, he'll destroy half the suburb. He's a
Yep.
threat to everyone, but it was all potential, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I am, I'm old school, I'm pretty fearsome when I get going. If I want to, make my point at somebody,
Do
I,
you use your police voice?
absolutely.
I get in trouble so often. It's like, don't yell. So I'm not yelling. I'm just making a
I'm not
point.
yelling.
My police voice. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, look, humour can get around it as well, and I use a lot of humour with my wife. There's only my wife and I at home and now, and I'll sometimes just joke around with it. I should arrest her and take her to bed and things like that. She doesn't.
um,
She doesn't mind that. She doesn't mind that.
no, this is that. Well, that's good.
Oh,
Right.
this is not what I was going to say. No, I can't think of the rating. This is not a kids only hour, is it?
No, 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 no. This is an 8. This
Okay,
is an
well,
18 plus. It's all
I
good.
didn't think so.
It's all good. Okay, so you were talking.
Yeah.
You've been arrested. You've had all these things happen.
Yeah, yeah, but I did
Um,
want to take that up where I was. So I was
yep,
sitting in the psych ward and I was effectively waiting to die. I sort of knew that, when things aren't good. And I couldn't eat. I hadn't eaten for quite a while. So I was half my body weight. And
yep,
I was catatonic, I think the word they use. So I was shaking and I couldn't get a cognitive thought. And this is the spiritual side that comes with me. I asked God for help. And I said, you've got to help me. And so after a few days, I wouldn't say I was 100%, but I was on the way. I was
yep,
talking, I was walking around. The staff frightened the shit out of them because last time they saw me, I was very different. And so I'd say, through, I could talk more about what happened and the other keys, I think, to my recovery. But definitely leaning into a loving and graceful God that I knew had my back, and that
Yep.
I could lean into Him, and He was going to help me recover. And I wanted to recover, so doing a lot of talk like we're doing now.
Yep.
So I couldn't find anyone to talk to. I know that's unbelievable, but I had psychologists. They'd run out of the room and all that. And now on reflection, I can see that these are people that they're very young. They go to university and they become a practitioner in their profession. That they've been nowhere near where I've been in life.
No,
And I'd be letting it all out. There's blood pissing everywhere, and there was fucking 3 kids in this bloody car one night at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're all dead, and trying to talk about how I feel.
yeah,
I hadn't even talked about how I feel yet, so I locked myself up almost literally in our upper room or upper study here at home, and because one morning, I got out of hospital and
yep,
I just woke up about 4 in the morning, bawling my eyes out again, and I thought, right, that's it. And so I started to frame it as grief. So, grief has 5 stages,
yep,
and I had to go through them. And there was no way around that, and so that's what I did, and continued to do that with probably my 3 or 4 main things. A couple of I mentioned before, until I described the sting went out of them, and now I kind of describe it like I've got little windows in the back of my head or somewhere where I
yeah,
can, it's not like I've completely forgotten. Like
yep,
we've done today, I can open up and we can explore, fatality, or when, this fella tried to kill me and blah, blah, blah. But I'll put the windows back on. I'll go and have dinner later or whatever, and watch some TV and go to bed and have a nice sleep. Now, sometimes, maybe after this, I'm sort of expecting there might be a few troubles,
yeah.
because this is a real focus on me and going through the whole thing, and But look, I'm willing to do it because I know that it's
But
not only.
you have people you can lean on if this conversation is a trigger.
Well, I do, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's my wife, who's pretty
Yep.
good actually, considering. But there are, if I need to go to counselling, guess what? I know a few counsellors. So. And for me, I've been part of my recovery again has been to get sober from alcohol. So I've been sober now for 7.5 years. So it's not an option
Congratulations.
to drink. Not an option to drink. I know that just doesn't do me any good.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's
How
been.
did you get to the counselling side of things then? So that because you said 2014, that's what 9-10 years ago. In that meantime, were you working? What happened there, and how did you get to this
It's
point where
hard. I
you?
did work, but it's hard to remember sort of the timelines. But for a
Yep.
while there, I just, people sort of said, look, and my wife said, just do some menial, whatever you want to do.
Yep.
And excuse me. So for a while there, I worked in traffic management, if you know what that is.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
stop, go, bat, and just
Yeah.
yeah.
I've worked in traffic management as well.
So, and after a while, I found that my intelligence and all that was too high. So they just wanted some. They didn't want you to think too much about it.
No.
Because I'd be. Yeah, I was quite experienced in the end, so I could go up and set up sites and all that sort of stuff. But as far as interacting with clients, they just go, because we're dealing in construction most of the time. Mate, I just want you to stand there. Blah, blah. And I go, hang on a minute, you can't tell me how to do my job. So I was getting into, the old Mark was coming back a bit. I could think, I could stand up for
Which is
myself.
the identity side of things.
It's the identity, yeah. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be good for them to have an ex-copper doing this sort of job? But most of them didn't see it that way.
No.
So anyway, that was there, but I also upgraded a certificate in training and assessment I have. So I've got the
Yep.
current training and assessment, which is pretty handy. It was pretty long-winded actually, because it's almost diploma level now. The work that's required, but anyway, so I've got that, and I taught mainly first aid as well,
Okay.
sort of in amongst the traffic management, or some I think towards the end. I was doing that almost full time because they were sending me everywhere, all over Melbourne, Victoria, because I thought, oh, he's pretty good. But this is another thing that happened with that. This is, for the audience at home. business coppers. I don't know. Well, I like to think. Well, I'll put it in the best light. Like we're very intelligent human beings, and we can really work with with a fluid environment and under stress. So, my boss actually said at this company, which was Australia wide, they said, "Well, you've had a lot of experience. We don't normally get trainers that have actually done so much first aid." Anyway, I had this wonderful idea that training should be as hands-on as you can. So I'd run role plays, and I'd be like in the role play, and I'd play someone drunk coming down the road, and abusing the people doing the first aid, like the students. Anyway, some of the young ones,
Took
they couldn't.
offence.
Well, yeah, they couldn't see the difference between when I was a trainer. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
unbelievable to me. That's what, so actually, what I
I'm with you. I'm right there with you.
but I'm just telling this is interesting, from what I think we have to. Well, I'll just finish this off. So anyway, my boss rang me. Oh, I'm getting complaints from these young people, and I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And I told her what I was doing, and she went, "Oh, look, just wrap them up in cotton wool." So I said, "Well, on Monday you can wrap my resignation up in cotton wool." So I was a bit. I didn't need to do that, but I reacted,
Yeah,
like
no, and every time you talk, and I'm going to make the assumption that anyone listening to this that has been in a first responder role, whether it
yes,
predominantly police, but fireys,
yeah.
ambos, whatever, are going to be
Mm.
sitting there nodding their head, going, "Shit, yeah, that's happened to me as well." Because I see exactly the same thing where I've done exactly the
So in a
same
lot of
thing.
ways, we're too incompetent, but also, sorry, not incompetent. We're too competent, is what I meant to say. But also, we somehow, and I'm sort of even looking at this now. I won't say this in the right words, but, lose the ability to know that you've got to go through the chain of command. Like I just said, well, I'm going to make these role plays up, right?
Yeah,
Which weren't in the original script for the training program, but I thought, what a great idea! I'll just do it. What I should have done
was
was
but
talk to my boss first.
you spend that formative period of your working life
Mm,
in a role where you have the ability to make decisions that have far more consequence than the decisions you're making now,
mm.
and it doesn't click with you that something that minor needs to be run through the thing because it never did in your formative working life.
Having said that, I don't want to really go much into how it changed and all that. But in the last few years, and that was another stress, I think. You know how things happen and you don't realise it's putting
Yep.
stress upon stress. But well, I remember this one, and this is what was happening. And so I'm out on the van, senior Connie, by that stage, 12, 13 years experience or whatever. And I'm called, but it was we knew who the crook was. It was just a willful damage or something. And so I'm going, yeah, we'll go around and get him, do this. And we get a call back, and there's a sergeant appeared from somewhere. I hadn't really seen him at my station before. And he says, "Oh, no, I've reviewed what's happening with you there. This is what we're going to do." Like he's telling me how to do my job that I've been
Yep.
doing for. So obviously, this was part of what was happening, this control thing was going on, so they could get to the point where we don't want anybody thinking for themselves. However, what's the conundrum with that is that so you're stuck in a situation where you can't go back to the station and talk about what you're going to do, which happens quite frequently.
Yes.
I don't want to say what's going on now. I'm glad I'm not there. That's all I can say.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. Um,
Yeah.
but I also think that for people of our experience, and anyone listening that's in that like 70s,
Mm,
80s, 90s vintage of policing,
mm,
because it's not that way now,
mm,
and private enterprise is that way,
mm.
we're handicapped. We've got one hand tied behind our back
Mm.
because the
Well,
way
we
we were,
feel it. Right? Mm,
the way our work life was fomented is
mm,
so different to what happens in the real
mm,
world. The
mm,
police are there now, but we've been
mm.
trained that way that we don't see it, if that makes sense. So we don't see the need for it for the way that the corporate world does it now in regards to that. Everything needs
Well,
to
we're
go through
probably
a
we yeah, we
command.
probably in essence because of who we are and where we've been, we don't fit into the corporate world
No,
because they'll do anything to go up the ladder and get more money. That's what it's all about.
this is very true. Um, Okay, I
So,
want to touch on how you got into with this group and talk more about the group and who they are, and we'll put all the details in
mm, mm,
the information about the podcast if there's contact details and that sort of stuff
mm,
if the group's open to that. But how did you
mm.
get involved with that, and how did you get into the counselling part?
Right. Well, the group that meet, they're two separate things,
Yep,
although it looks like there's going to be some crossover happening as we go along. We're just starting to talk about that, but that's in the early stages. So, I was only a few months ago. I don't know. How did I get? I must perhaps I saw. Oh, I think I saw something on a group I'm in on Facebook.
yep,
And anyway, you'll know what this means. The group's called TJF,
yeah.
right?
I think anyone
Yeah.
listening will know what that is. Yes.
But they've called very clever. They've called it's actually the journey forward. It's not what you think,
No,
but it is.
that's a very good reframe. Yes.
Yeah, that's what they've done because apparently these two guys that started the management of the Victoria Police came after them, and of course have no control or nothing to do with them, of course.
Yep.
But that's what they do. Anyway, so that's once a fortnight. In fact, we're meeting this Friday, and at 10 a.m. we're all going to the Morty Alley Bowls Club, and we're going to have a bit of a bowl and a bit of a laugh and a giggle and a talk and that sort of thing. So we don't always do activities like that. Sometimes we're just sitting around a table and having a talk.
Yep.
Um, and we realise that's what I'm just talking to some people at my counselling work, or the woman there that's the supervisor or the CEO basically of the
Yep.
company. And she said, look, she's heard a few stories, and she said, look, I think someone needs some group moderator training because it can get a bit out of control
Yeah.
with we're all triggering each other and stuff,
Yeah.
and you don't even realise it until it happens,
Yep.
and then somebody's pretty upset and not well, all that sort of thing. So we don't want that to happen. We want us to all be supported. So anyway, that's what happens once a fortnight, and
And
it's
if anyone's listening to this, do they take people to come and join, or is it
of course,
yeah?
we're hoping that we'll grow it into more groups, basically all over the country,
Is
but
there a
at
Facebook
least all
page
over
or
Melbourne.
something or other that they use?
Sorry.
Is there a Facebook
Oh
page?
yeah, there might be a Facebook, but there's definitely a website. So if you put in TJF, it should come up.
All right, we'll grab the website details and I'll put it in the
Yeah,
comment
right.
part of this.
No,
So if
fair enough.
people
Yeah, I
are
don't have that
interested,
in front of me.
and we might be able to start
Yeah,
nationalising it. Is that the right word? Making it into
I know.
a
Again.
nationwide group. Um, so how did you get into the counselling then? So the counselling was obviously before you became involved with this group.
Yeah, yeah. So look, I was really, my wife said, well, oh, that's right. I was put on work cover after all that time. Would you believe? I resubmitted that, and
From the police.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was accepted. So I'm on a nice payment every week, which helps. But yeah, so anyway, but my wife said, look, you better, do whatever you want to do, whatever you think you should do. And look, I'm a man that's still, I know that you could be at 62, you could say, well, I'll just do nothing and go and play golf, but I'm not like that. So, I
A
really
bit of
do want
golf.
to help, and I thought, help others, and so I thought, well, what a great way to do it, So I just investigated, and well, I'd already, spoken to plenty of councils and that, and I thought, I
Yep.
reckon I could do a pretty good deal of this, and particularly I mean, I'll help anybody, but a particular focus on, ex-police and paramedics and others that are
Yep.
suffering. So there's nothing like talking to someone that's from your environment. Because often I've had discussions before, and I think that happened to me as well. You'd have counsellors or psychologists or whatever. They spend an awful lot of time picking your brains because they just wanted to know what it was like to be a copper. They didn't really have much to offer you in. I mean, all that stuff I've been through, I discussed before. That's all on offer to recover, and then of course the strength of the recovery is in working towards what you can go on to,
Yep.
because you can of recover, you can, and where I was, so you can recover to an extent where you can go on with life and function and have a good life. And that's what I
And
want. That's what I want for anyone.
this is true.
Uh,
In regards to with the counselling, I just wanted to make a point because
yeah,
we were
that's all
talking
right.
about how you spoke
Yeah.
to a lot of psychologists who were just out of university and they didn't understand that sort of stuff.
Mm, mm,
One of the things one of the advice that I was given is to find someone who, one, was older,
mm,
and two, who had a very good understanding of first responders.
mm, mm.
Because that way
Yeah,
they could then frame all the stuff that they need to talk about in
yeah,
language that you understand, and they
yeah.
would understand it as well. Now, in regards to your counselling service that you work for, do you want to give that a plug here? So if people need to
Yeah,
are looking
I'm
for
happy
someone
to say,
to think, oh, they can contact
yeah, if
either
they
yourself
really
or whatever you want.
might be of help. Yeah.
Um,
So, yep, it's called Redefine Life.
yep.
Redefine Life. There is a website.
Well, again, we'll put those details in the
redefinelife.com.au. I think that's basically it.
so redefine life.
That's the way I'm just reading from a card here
Yeah, no,
from
that's okay.
Natalie.
So we'll put those details in there as well, and if anyone feels that they would benefit
Mm.
from talking to uh,
And
the
I'm happy
organisation Mark's
to,
with, then
yeah, I'm happy to, give my phone number across if that's, there might be something they can use
mate,
it
that's
for.
entirely up to you. It's your platform.
Yeah, well, it
You
just
give the
makes it
information you
easier, I
want.
think.
Yeah,
And I'm not a big IT man. I know how to use it, but to me, it just gets in the way of a good time. So 0400 212 284. And certainly, if I can't help, then someone else will be able
and put you in touch with someone who
help.
can.
But seriously, I don't. Well, there's not a lot. There are others, but there's probably not a lot that are really got that are ex-coppers that have got a real focus on that profession, I guess.
Yep, not a problem. Well,
And
again, we'll put those details in the comments there.
sure,
So if your phone goes off, don't blame me. Uh,
yeah, right. Yeah.
um,
So look, it's it's great. It's a lot of fun actually because even though there's some heavy weather when people are right in the thick of it,
yep,
I just sort of think, I'm doing, this is what I needed when I was going through it. An ex-copper
yeah,
that knew his stuff, that had some counselling, training and all the rest of it to really, and often it's just being able to bear with people, hold space, as they say.
yep,
Because when you're going through some heavy shit, some people just go, "Fuck, I can't do this," and that's
yep.
okay because we're all different. I don't want to go and
Absolutely.
lay bricks, and the bricklayer probably doesn't want to come and do what I'm doing, so that's all right.
I'm no good at. My brother and father were both uh, tradies, and the only thing I
Yeah.
hit with a hammer is my thumb. Um, now,
Mm.
one of the things that we spoke about earlier
Mm.
was talking about if someone came to you and said, "I want to be a police officer." What do you wish you knew then when you joined the police that you know now?
Ooh, probably a little bit more about what it was really all about.
Do you think that would have
Yeah.
stopped you from joining?
Oh, I don't, probably not, but I think that I was just I was playing footy with these blokes. I got on well with most of them.
Hmm.
So similar sort of blokes. So they were talking about they weren't talking about fatalities, obviously, or anything. Although they would have been there, they were just talking about camaraderie mostly.
Yep,
So I've heard other people say the same thing, and that's my experience. That when I went to work with the coppers, it was just like the footy club,
yep,
just an extension of the footy club, really.
yep.
And so that was a good feeling. But
So, what do you think the biggest myth is about policing?
the myth,
Yeah, people have.
I think there really any myths. I mean, as a young fellow, my memory was, I was after action. I wasn't going to listen to anybody that said that there was a nasty side to it. Just having a go on 19.
Fair enough.
So
Now,
from that point of
I asked you the question of what advice would you give someone
view.
who
Mm,
was thinking of joining the police?
mm,
Um, your response was don't. Um,
mm. Yeah.
what? Let's say someone really was wanting to do it. Uh,
Mm.
what what type of person do you think needs to be a police officer? What
Well,
type of person do you think
what I
would be
what I
fair?
think and what the police force think now might be two different things. But
Yeah, but this isn't a podcast for the police force.
no, well, look, I don't really know anymore. I can well from my experience. Um, and this is what it's going to go real. It's going to look like I'm a dinosaur, but I think they had it right when they had a policewoman division. So we don't want policewomen out in the general duties and all that, on the front
Yep.
line. So young, strong men, or just even older ones, but people going in, young, strong men that because that's what a lot of the time it is. I mean, there is smarts involved, but a lot of the time that's why they used to hire us like that
Yep.
because the older fellas are getting older and less fit. And that's why they concentrate so much on the fitness in the academy. We've got to get out there and grab the crooks and everyone before, and keep the place safe.
Fair
It's
enough.
hardly going to be safe with a whole heap of big fat men going around, is it? Can't even, they're
This is
dropping
very
dead through cholesterol.
This is very true. All right, look, I guess the last question
Yeah.
that I always ask is, and it's not really a question, it's more like the last word. I'll leave the last word to you to say
Mm.
whatever it is you want in regards to policing your journey, anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that under the current regime, anyway, that you're going to have, unless you're one that for some reason isn't going to be affected, but you will. And so, how are you going to deal with that? You talk. I don't know whether you're talking about entering or whatever, but just generally, it's going to affect your mental health. That all the shift work and everything is going to
Hmm.
be really difficult for your family. It's okay for a single person, and once you get a family and everything. Um, is that something you want for your family? It's okay to say that you want to go out and it's a noble profession. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the people like myself and you and all those that have basically sacrificed themselves for the cause is very noble. But until let's put it this way, until the police force itself has a way of supporting us in that, then I'd say it's untenable, to be quite honest. Um, it's almost like some of my thoughts are police should be like military in a way. We should have tours. I know they get leave and all that, but
Yep.
it is so exhausting, particularly some of these heavier jobs that
Do you think
you know.
mandatory leave is something that should be put in place that say after 8 months, that's it, you're taking 4 weeks off?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
But with that, obviously people have got to have their holidays and family
Yeah.
or whatever. Perhaps they do. Well, something that doesn't even affect that outside of that. You go for a week, just mandatory, a week at a retreat somewhere.
Yep. Yeah.
And let's really, with people like me, let's really talk about what's going on,
Yep.
and really let's bust it down to what's going on because it's what I'm most concerned about, and this is what makes me a good counsellor. I think is that I'm most concerned about the individual. I really couldn't give a fuck about the police force or any other
Yeah.
institution. It's the person. I mean, look at me. I'm going on 18 years. I haven't seen my kids. Now that's a pretty severe outcome from
Yeah.
the. And I'd say it was a lot of the job.
Yep.
What they experienced and what their dad ended up being. So yeah, until they've got a proper plan in place about what they're doing about those things, stay away. And all I want to do is just see people recover. And at these meetings we have every fortnight, we just get more and more come because people are becoming more aware because they're put on sick leave, things like that, and they're sitting at home. What do? There's no recovery plan.
Yeah.
So they can come to us, and we're working on it. It's a work in progress because a lot of us have just sort of only got some recovery and sort of saying, right, this is what we did. What can we do? So in other words, it's not a like plug in at A and come out at Z. Certainly not at the moment, anyway. So
No, I guess there's sort of something else now that's just popped in my mind. We were talking about, don't join the police. If someone is still hell bent on joining the police, what advice would you give them to keep their I was going to say sanity, but that's not the right word. To keep their mental health,
probably,
keep their
yeah.
mental health healthy, what would you say to them that they should be doing? Taking a week off now and then, but would
That sort of
you?
thing. I think that people would say, exercise, healthy exercise, all that. Don't drink.
Yep,
Most people are going to go, yeah, right. Well, I drink. But really, that's to me, they're the lightweight things. They're good things to do,
yep.
but there's something more that happens. All I
What
can
about
say
having
is,
someone to talk to, putting that in place at a
I
very
believe that some
early
of these,
stage of your career?
I believe that some of the things I was involved in, and probably not, I wouldn't be the only one. That it wasn't a mental thing particularly. I had a broken spirit.
Yep,
I'm
yep,
dragging around, involved in death and mayhem every week, and thinking, I can't cope with this. But I wouldn't have been able to put that together,
yep.
because my superiors or whatever, the job just said, "Well, drink more piss," and then if you're not too
Yeah,
good, drink more piss, and
drink more
that's
piss. Yeah. All right. Look, what I'll do,
don't
mate,
do that.
is no.
Yeah.
Mark, I'll leave it there. Look, thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving me the time to have this conversation and for going through some of those things that you've spoken about. I appreciate the impact that it could very well have on you. To everyone else who has been listening, Mark's details, the details of his support or the support group that he belongs to, will be in the link provided. And thank you for listening for Behind the Thin Blue Line. If you're a current or past police officer and you'd like to tell your story, just as Mark has, or talk about what you do, then please email me at whisperintheshadowspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you very much, and we will catch you all next time.